It's time for an inside look at what's cooking on the San Diego Padres hot stove as the team gets ready for the 2025 season.
Swing and a miss. Padres win.
Sam Levitt breaks down the Padres offseason moves and provides an in-depth look at everything you need to know before the Padres take the field for spring training.
Swinging a high fly ball. Deep left center. This one way back and gone.
Plus the latest headlines from around Major League Baseball and analysis of what's happening around the big leagues.
Breaking news out of baseball.
Welcome to Inside San Diego Baseball with the Padres Radio Network's pre- and post-game host, Sam Levitt.
We are live on a Tuesday night, live from Dallas, Texas at the 2024 Major League Baseball Winter Meetings. Welcome into Inside San Diego Baseball. Sam Levitt with you live from the Hilton Anatole in Dallas. It has been a very fun couple of days at the Winter Meetings. A lot of good stuff going on. Always a very, very fun time of year. Lucky to be here. Lucky to be covering all the different things going on here this year at the Winter Meetings. Not a ton of news the first couple of days. We had the Juan Soto news break on Sunday night. Juan Soto signing just an unbelievable deal with the New York Mets. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up a little bit later. And then really until the last few hours, not much news at all as far as signings and trades. We did get really three moves in the last few hours. We'll get to those in just a little bit. And a lot more to come. I've spent the last couple of days all around this hotel, talking to different people, talking to reporters, talking to AJ Preller, talking to Mike Schilt, talking to Jake Peavy, talking to people who evaluate the Padres minor league system. We are going to have a very wide-ranging, informative, entertaining, analytical 2-hour program as we take you up until 9 p.m. on this special Tuesday night edition of Inside San Diego Baseball. And like we alluded to last week, we moved the show up to Tuesday night because I'm traveling back to San Diego tomorrow. My flight is tomorrow night. So I made all the sense in the world to move things up to tonight, and here we are. And I will say for the people watching on YouTube, my initial plan was to be somewhere downstairs in the lobby of this beautiful hotel. It's decked out really nicely for the holidays, lights, and you can hear all the music and people milling around. I will say, though, I needed an outlet because I was going to be on for 2 hours, and I needed it for my laptop. I needed it for our broadcast equipment, and I just could not find the right spot in the 8 p.m. hour locally here, so I had to make a bit of an audible, come up to my hotel room. So for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm in my hotel room. It's nice and quiet in here, but you don't really get that Winter Meetings feel like I've been doing on my spots on all the shows the last couple of days. So we adjust, and it's nice and quiet in here, so we should have plenty of good stuff. We will take your phone calls as the program moves along. 833-288-0973. Phone number 833-288-0973. And I will say, even though the Padres have not made a move here at the Winter Meetings, they have not made really a significant move yet this offseason, there's still a lot to talk about and a lot to chew on from the different things we've heard here at the Winter Meetings over the course of the last few days. We have the great Frank Marchese back in the studio in San Diego. He is running the board, producing tonight. Frank will chime in from time to time on the program. How are you?
Doing great, Sam. How are you?
Doing well. It's a fun time of year and a lot of work. I'll say this. I've been running around all day. It's now 9:04 p.m. local time, and we've still got a 2-hour radio program to knock out here. So put it this way, 97.3 The Fan getting the bang for their buck on this trip, as I think they usually do with my coverage.
You couldn't pitch a green screen up in your bag, huh? That bed looks a mess back there. Cleaning service.
Well, as you can see on YouTube,
cutting you short here.
On YouTube, you can't see the bed, but I will admit it's not made or anything back there. You know what? Today I didn't have the room service or anything because I had equipment in here and stuff. So anyway, room's a little bit messy, but for those of you watching, you're not going to see it anyway, so no big deal. All right, let's start with just a quick recap of the moves that have happened here at the winter meetings in the last few hours, and some pretty major moves. The Yankees, after missing out on Juan Soto, they do sign left-hander Max Fried, $218 million reportedly for Max Fried, who's a terrific left-hander, one of the best left-handers in baseball, an 8-year deal, and Max Fried is heading to the American League East, a deal with the New York Yankees. Some other news, Nathan Eovaldi apparently agreeing to a 3-year deal with the Texas Rangers, so he's heading back to Arlington, 3 years, $75 million for the 35-year-old Nathan Eovaldi. So the Rangers reportedly getting him back. And then a pretty interesting trade, the Blue Jays trading for Cleveland Guardians second baseman Andres Gimenez, who's a good player. Infielder Spencer Horwitz is one of the prospects heading back to Cleveland in that deal. So Andres Gimenez, all-star second baseman, really nice player. He is heading to Toronto, and all that happening in the last few hours or so here at the winter meetings as we moved on into the evening. So quick updates there on the moves across baseball here on day 2. I'll tell you, really until the last few hours between the Juan Soto deal and those moves, there really has not been anything going on. It's been sort of eerily similar to last year, where everybody was complaining about the lack of activity at the winter meetings, and really until the last few hours there has not been much, but finally a little flurry of moves, and we'll see what happens tomorrow, even overnight here, and to see if the Padres make any moves as well. From a Padres standpoint, the most interesting part of today, there really were a few different interesting things that happened today. And we'll get into it as this hour rolls along. But it really started this morning, and we'll get a little bit deeper into Kevin Acey's article a little bit later this hour. But Kevin Acey writing about some of the potential financial restrictions the Padres may be under for their 2025 payroll. The fact that they may have to come down from the number it would be at right now with their current commitments in arbitration. The idea that they would not go above the luxury tax in 2025. Kevin writing about all that this morning in the San Diego Union Tribune, and a little bit later on in the day, Kevin writing about the Padres, having some interest, or at least fielding calls about Dylan Cease. Now, is any of this particularly surprising? I don't think so. If you heard me on the station the last couple of days, the buzz and vibe I got here at the winter meetings, without getting into the specifics of numbers and will they go over or below the luxury tax, was that the payroll was a real question for the Padres, and something that a lot of people here at the winter meetings were wondering, what is that number going to be? And that number may very well dictate how they have to operate moving forward into next season, and how creative AJ Preller may have to get. But in this opening segment, let's view that alongside the Roki Sasaki situation, because I think that's really, if we didn't know it already, that is the most important element right now for the San Diego Padres. And quite frankly, we may not know where Roki Sasaki is going for another month. Okay, this posting process just began yesterday officially for Sasaki, and he's probably going to sign somewhere in the January 15th to January 23rd range officially. Doesn't mean he can't pick a team, but we know he's going to have meetings at a centralized location somewhere in the near future. Teams will make their presentations. Then it sounds like Sasaki's going to go back to Japan for the holidays, and then come back and maybe make some trips to different cities around the U.S., visit with different teams. The process, officially at least, is really getting underway for Sasaki, his representation, and the teams that are interested in him. But earlier today, his agent, Joel Wolf, spoke with, I'm not kidding, it could have been 100 to 150 media members in the media workroom here in Dallas at the Hilton Anatole. And I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff to take away from Joel Wolf speaking with the media officially about Roki Sasaki for the very first time. Now, before we get into some of the things that Wolf had to say, look, when an agent is up there talking about his client, are we going to take every word he says at gospel, right? Probably not, because he's trying to not give away too much. And, there's an element where, of course, it's in his best interest to make as many teams appear really interested in Roki Sasaki as possible. And it makes sense that teams would be interested, a lot of teams, because you don't have to pay him very much at all, and he's a terrific talent, and many believe he is going to be an absolute ace in Major League Baseball. Now, am I asking you to believe that, and you'll hear maybe some of this in the clips, that, Joe Wolf and Roki Sasaki haven't discussed the teams that would make sense or where he would like to go, or at least narrowed it down to a group of teams? It may be hard to believe that conversation hasn't happened yet, at least in some respect. But for the purpose of this segment and this conversation, let's just listen to what Joel Wolf had to say, because I do think it was really interesting, and we'll probably continue this on into later in the hour. But let's get to some of the audio from Agent Joe Wolf of Wasserman, who spoke with the media about Roki Sasaki. And it really starts with this. This is one of the more interesting elements of what we heard today. Here was Joel Wolf talking about Roki Sasaki and some of the things that have happened between Sasaki and the media in Japan.
You mentioned Roki's former teammates with the WBC. How important is comfortability for Roki and his decision?
I don't know yet, to be honest. Roki's had a tough go of it the last couple of years. The media in Japan, not the Japanese media based here, I want to clarify that, but the media in Japan has been very tough on him. And he's not had a great time with it. And I think it's, my personal opinion, I think it's been a bit unfair. And it's affected him mentally a little bit. But he's a great kid, and comes from a great family. I know his mother, I know his brother, and his dream is to come here to the major leagues. And I think that he hasn't really wrapped his head around the individual teams and the individual cities, and he just really doesn't know much about them. Most of the Japanese players don't, because they don't get the opportunity to come here. He was here for a very small amount of time because he was fortunate enough to play in the WBC, but that was a very small glimpse of it. So it's really hard to say until I sit down with him and talk to him about it.
What are the biggest issues with the media been over there? You kind of made references to it.
There's been a lot of negativity in the media directed at him because he has expressed interest at going to play for MLB at such a young age, and that's considered in Japan to be very disrespectful and sort of swimming upstream. And there's been a lot of things, a lot of people jumped on board there, creating some false rumors about him and his family, and it was very detrimental to his mental state.
So that was MLB agent Joe Wolf on Roki Sasaki and the situation with the media in Japan. And the reason I start with that clip is because it really brings us into this second clip we'll play from Joel Wolf about Roki Sasaki. And this was on small to middle market teams, the argument that Wolf feels those teams would have to land a guy like Sasaki. Here was part of that.
Do you think he would consider small to mid-market teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's an argument to be made that a smaller mid-market team might be more beneficial for him as a soft landing coming from Japan, given what he's been through. Sorry if I'm not doing this right. Given what he's been through and not having an enjoyable experience with the media, it might be. I'm not saying it will be, but I don't know how he's going to view it. It might be beneficial for him to be in a smaller market. But I really don't know how he looks at it yet because I haven't had a chance to really sit down and, discuss it with him in great detail.
So that was really interesting, I thought, from Joel Wolfe, talking about there being an argument that Roki Sasaki landing in a small to middle-sized market would be a quote-unquote soft landing spot. And my goodness, does that not scream San Diego, California, and the San Diego Padres? So when you think about the Padres and Roki Sasaki, and there were a lot of different things mentioned in nearly a half-hour media session with this agent, Joel Wolfe, of all the things that were said, that really, really stood out. And I would say, based on what we know, the fact that you had John Heyman, Tom Verducci, earlier this week tell me that the Dodgers and Padres, they're the favorites for Sasaki. People believe they are the favorites for Roki Sasaki. And we've heard that kind of across the board for some time. When you pair that with the idea that the Padres do have Yu Darvish, and we'll get to him in a second, somebody that Sasaki admires, somebody that Sasaki has some sort of relationship with, paired with the fact that the Padres can offer a smaller market where maybe it's not the pressure cooker that, let's say, a New York would be, or a bigger city would be, or even the Dodgers up in L.A., coming off a World Series, all the attention with Ohtani and all the attention they get, maybe that's the kind of situation that Sasaki doesn't want. And that's not to say, and you know me, I love Padres fans. It's not to say that Padres fans aren't passionate, that there aren't high standards. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that when you talk about maybe getting away from a Dodgers, an East Coast team, the Padres kind of fit that bill of a little bit of a smaller place, maybe a little bit less attention, maybe a place where Sasaki can just pitch a little bit more without the microscope of being alongside Ohtani and the rest of the Dodgers, without being in New York, without being in a bigger market. It was just something that this agent, Joel Wolfe, went, in my mind, very in-depth about in a way that I don't know he needed to. So just keep it in mind as if that's true, if that's something that Joel Wolfe and Sasaki believe could be a fit for him, well, then the Padres would seemingly be a pretty good fit. Not a pretty good, a great fit for Sasaki in that sense. We'll continue to talk about Sasaki when we come back. We'll play a couple of more clips from Joel Wolfe. We will take your phone calls, 833-288-0973, the phone number, 833-288-0973, the phone number to call. But remember, the reason we're spending so much time talking about Roki Sasaki is because when you consider the potential financial restrictions the Padres have on their 2025 payroll, it is very clear, if it wasn't already, that acquiring Roki Sasaki would be massive, would be incredibly important for the Padres this offseason. Not that it's absolute disaster if they don't get him, but if they can, it A, gives them a potential star pitcher in their rotation, and they need starting pitching right now and in the future, and it's a guy who does not cost very much at all. It would accomplish both those goals, and I think make the rest of this offseason much, much easier for the San Diego Padres. We'll continue our live coverage from the MLB Winter Meetings in Dallas, Texas. You're listening to Inside San Diego Baseball. We continue after this on 97.3 The Fan. We continue on here on Inside San Diego Baseball on this Tuesday night. We are live at the Winter Meetings in Dallas, Texas. Sam Levitt with you from the Hilton Anatole, where all the baseball executives from all 30 teams and baseball people from all over the country, all over the world, they have gathered here in Dallas, Texas as the Winter Meetings continue. We spent the opening segment talking about Roki Sasaki, what his agent Joel Wolfe had to say earlier today. So we'll continue that here. We will take your phone calls coming up here in this segment and the rest of the program at 833-288-0973. So we heard from Joel Wolfe, agent to Roki Sasaki, about some of Sasaki's, I don't want to say issues, but the situation between him and the media in Japan and how he's been covered in Japan and some of the impact that's had on Sasaki. And then Joel Wolfe saying there would be an argument based on some of what he's went through with the media there. There would be an argument where Sasaki landing with a small to mid-market team would be a soft landing spot and potentially a good situation for Sasaki. And ding, 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 sounds like a team that is called the San Diego Padres. Sounds like a market, a place where Sasaki could go to a bit of a smaller market, maybe a little bit less of a pressure-packed situation, if you will. Again, not that there's not pressure to win in San Diego. I think there very much is right now. But you're not with the Ohtani and the All-Stars and that whole World Series winning team in LA. You're not on the East Coast. You get away from at least a little bit of the spotlight. So, again, that's part of what Joel Wolfe had to say earlier today. A little bit more here from Joel Wolfe, and then we'll get to your phone calls. This was yours truly earlier today asking, again, Joel Wolfe, agent to Roki Sasaki, about the San Diego Padres and Yu Darvish in particular.
Joel, considering his admiration for Yu Darvish, relationship potentially with you, how would a team like, say, the San Diego Padres fit as a suitor?
I would assume that that would be a team that he would seriously consider, but, you know, his relationship with Darvish is private between the two of them, and how much that will weigh on his decision-making, we'll have to find out.
How open would he be to be playing with some of his former WBC teammates, whether it be Darvish or Yamamoto or something like that?
That's a good question. You know, just a few years ago when I was representing Senga, one of the questions we heard from many teams, and then I heard again with Yamamoto, was it an obstacle to signing the player by having other Japanese players on the team, or was it an attraction? And it's different for every single player. Each player is unique in how they feel about it, and I think it also matters on the player that is already on the team. How much do they reach out to other Japanese players? How are they perceived by this particular Japanese player? And it just varies player to player.
With Roki and his age, do you think it's more beneficial, or, you know, the attraction part of it? Is he leaning that way?
I think it could be. It could be to have an older player to help him, you know, show him the ropes. But anyone that knows Roki Sasaki, this is one of the most driven, intense players I've ever known and been around. Incredibly hardworking. And I wouldn't say that he would necessarily need it to succeed. I think he'll be just fine wherever he goes, whether he has a Japanese senpai or not.
So that was Joel Wolfe, the agent for Roki Sasaki. And again, a lot of interesting stuff to chew on there. And Joel Wolfe there talking about the relationship with Yu Darvish and the idea that Sasaki could play alongside some of his World Baseball Classic teammates from Team Japan, and how much that will weigh into his decision. We'll hear from AJ Preller. We'll hear from Jonathan Mayo, who works for MLB.com, about the Padres minor league system a little bit later. We'll also hear from Jake Peavy. We've got a lot to cover here from the winter meetings in Dallas, but I do want to get you involved on the program. Phone number 833-288-0973. We can talk Roki Sasaki or anything else as far as the Padres here at the winter meetings, and we'll talk plenty about the idea of Dylan Cease trade and some of the payroll restrictions that Kevin Acee wrote about earlier this morning. We'll get to all of it as we take you up until 9 p.m. Let's go to the phones. We begin things here tonight. We go to El Cajon. It's Owen. Owen, you're on 97.3 The Fan. Go ahead.
Hi, Sam. How you doing tonight, sir?
Doing well.
Good, man. So just a couple questions. One on Roki Sasaki. Do you anticipate us trading Dylan Cease if we sign Sasaki?
Oh, and it's a good question. I don't know, to be quite honest with you, how much one has to do with the other. Now, you could make the argument that if you get Sasaki, makes it a little bit easier because you fill a rotation spot, you have more depth there, might make it easier to, well, I'll say this, could make it easier to trade Cease. Could also make it easier not to trade him because then you fill the spot where maybe you don't trade Dylan to go get another starting pitcher. Maybe you can manage to move forward without trading Dylan Cease. So it's a good question. I don't have the exact answer, and I'm not sure which way that could go. I think you could actually make probably an argument for either if they could get Sasaki.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. The more better arms in the starting rotation, the better. And my next question is, any word on the Ha-Seong Kim market right now?
No, I've not heard anything on that, Owen, in regards to the Padres, and I haven't heard much on Kim at all. There has not been a whole lot of buzz on Ha-Seong Kim, so have not heard a whole lot. Owen, appreciate the phone call. Look, I don't know what kind of deal Kim is going to get, but it seems like it's been very quiet on the Ha-Seong Kim front. Let's go to John in Chula Vista. John, you're on 97.3 The Fan. Go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing, Sammy?
Hey.
How you doing, bud?
Doing well.
You're kind of answering, you're kind of answering, some of the questions about Cease and Sasaki. But let me ask you this. All right. So, well, say if they got, Sasaki, what would be our, five-man rotation right now?
Well,
what
John,
would we have? Is Waldron coming back, or is
maybe? I mean, I think, John, as is, let's live in a world where they did land Sasaki, and let's say they didn't trade Dylan Cease or anybody else in that rotation. Well, then on opening day, your five-man rotation, and by the way, Sasaki may be more comfortable going every sixth day coming from Japan. That's something that Yoshinobu Yamamoto did, so that's something to keep in mind. But let's consider it a five-man rotation right now. You keep everybody. It's King, it's Darvish, it's Cease, it's Sasaki, and you'd have one more spot open for a Matt Waldron, for a Randy Vasquez, for a Johnny Brito. I am sure the Padres somehow, some way will acquire other starting pitching options, or at least depth pieces as far as starting pitching. You need that over the course of a season. But let's say in a month they got Sasaki and they didn't make any addition. Well, then again, you're looking at Darvish, King, Cease, Sasaki, and somebody for that fifth spot, whether it's Waldron or Vasquez or Brito, at least at the current moment. John, appreciate the phone call. Let's stay in Chula Vista. It's Diego. Diego, you're on Inside San Diego Baseball. Go ahead.
Hey, Sammy, how you doing?
Doing well, Diego.
Glad to hear that. Hope they're keeping you all well fed over there in Dallas.
Yeah, they are. Meat and barbecue. Very well fed.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask about Roki Sasaki. So I have two questions. One, when it comes to Sasaki, how big of an influence would you personally say that having someone like Hideo Nomo in the Padres organization be heavily involved? How would you say that adds to the Padres' let's call it a case for signing him.
Yeah, Diego, appreciate the phone call. Look, I would think you would play some sort of role. Again, from what we heard, at least from his agent, Joel Wolf, today, look, there are a lot of different factors at play. I'm not sure how much having older Japanese influence will play or not. I mean, I would assume it's a factor. I would assume it's a very good thing to have Yu Darvish, to have Hideo Nomo involved in the organization. How much that's going to weigh versus other factors against other teams that maybe don't have that I don't know. And that's basically what we heard from his agent today. Look, I think clearly it's going to play some role. I just don't know how big of a role. Is having Yu Darvish with the Padres, is that going to seal the deal? Maybe, maybe not. Is having Hideo Nomo involved with the organization going to seal the deal? Maybe, maybe not. I think right now we know some things about Sasaki and what he might want, and I think there's a lot we don't know. You know, to be honest with you, I think there's a lot we just don't know about what he wants and what he values and what's going to ultimately be the most important thing to him. Let's squeeze in one more phone call in this segment. Let's go to L.A. Kathy on the line. Kathy, go ahead.
Hey, Sammy. Wasn't the team in the same position last year where it got past the winter meetings and we still hadn't signed anybody really big and everybody's freaking out, and look how the season turned out.
Yeah, Kathy, I think there are similarities and there are differences, and appreciate the phone call. I think the similarities are this. Let's assume the Padres do have to stay under the luxury tax, and they are actually trying to get the payroll down from where it would be right now with the current crop of players based on arbitration projections. Well, then there's a similarity because AJ Preller and the Padres are operating under some kind of financial restraint, and they've got to stay within that and maybe even get payroll down if that reporting from Kevin Acee was accurate today. And he reported that today, and we'll get more into that in our next segment, really give you an idea of what Kevin reported. So in that way, Kathy, I would say it's similar because the Padres were in a similar situation last year where they had to shed a ton of payroll, and that's why they had to trade Juan Soto. So that's similar. I would say the big difference is this. Speaking of Juan Soto, they don't have that one very obvious, very desirable, not that they don't have desirable pieces. Hey, you put Dylan Cease on the market, teams are going to want him, no doubt about it. But they don't have that obvious, okay, like at this time last year at the winter meetings, we knew the Padres were going to trade Soto. It was pretty clear at that point. We just didn't know when or to who. And it ended up being the Yankees, and it ended up being at the winter meetings. We just didn't know to who. So they don't have that sort of one big piece looming over everything. That's the way I would say it's a little bit different. It's also similar, Kathy, to your point in the sense that AJ Preller's going to have to potentially get really creative and hit on a lot of moves and do a really good job and do a very similar job to what he did last year, where he found value all over the place. He found a way to shed payroll, $90+ million of payroll, and build a team that won 93 games. I mean, it was an unbelievable job by AJ Preller last year. Look, there's no doubt about that. Last year, AJ did an amazing job to shed that much payroll and get this team to 93 wins. It's similar in that sense, but I think because there's not the Soto part of it, it's a little bit different. But there are similarities for sure. And to your point, I think it's important to remember it is December 10th. It's very early in the offseason. I mean, we are still 2 months from spring training. As we learned last year, I mean, heading into spring training, you know who wasn't in the Padres clubhouse? Let me list the names. Profar, Peralta, Solano, Arise, Cease, Adam, Scott. I mean, none of those guys were with the Padres when spring training started last year. So it just, again, it's a reminder there's a ways to go. AJ Preller tends to not work on everybody else's timeline. He'll make moves in spring training. He'll make moves late. He'll make moves early in the season. It's a developing situation. So we may not have all the answers, every hole filled, every position filled by the time we get to the start of February. But we've learned with A.J. Preller that doesn't necessarily mean much. Doesn't mean it's not going to ultimately get figured out, and ultimately get figured out in a pretty good way. Let's step aside. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about what Kevin Acee had to report today. We'll hear from A.J. Preller. Much more to get to on 97.3 The Fan. We're back after this. Inside San Diego Baseball continues on this Tuesday night. We are at the Winter Meetings in Dallas, Texas. A lot of good baseball stuff going on. Sam Levitt here Inside the Hotel Anatole, we've got Frank Marchese back in our San Diego studios doing a great job getting us on the air back in San Diego. We will continue to take your phone calls, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973, talking all things Padres baseball. And in just a few minutes, we'll also hear a little bit of what AJ Preller had to say to me earlier today. But before we do that, we've mentioned it a number of times during this Roki Sasaki conversation and during this first hour. And that was some of the reporting today from Kevin Acee. And let's go over the two pieces that Kevin put out today. And look, you may have heard me on the station the last couple of days talk about some of the buzz and some of the chatter about the Padres payroll situation that people were speculating about here at the winter meetings. And essentially, what I heard from people people I had spoken to that cover the game, that have an idea of these things, is that the Padres are in a tight spot. They weren't sure what the payroll number would be. They weren't sure how much the Padres had to spend, if they would go above the luxury tax number, below the luxury tax number. But that, AJ Preller was in a little bit of a box and may have to get really creative once again. So with that in mind, here's what Kevin Acee wrote today, earlier this morning, in the San Diego Union-Tribune. And the headline of this article was Padres trying to make numbers work for 2025. And the two parts of this that are really important, I'll read what Kevin wrote verbatim. The Padres' payroll, according to sources familiar with their plans, will be higher than last year's final mark of $169 million. No one is saying what it will be, but indications are the opening day figure will be lower than the projected $210 million in commitments the Padres currently have when arbitration-eligible players are included. Kevin continues a little bit later. Wherever their actual payouts for 2025 land, one source said there is no scenario in which the Padres exceed the competitive balance tax threshold of $241 million. The CBT payroll takes into account the average annual value of contracts, meaning a player like Manny Machado counts $31.8 million against the CBT, even though he will make just $13 million in 2025. The Padres' projected CBT number is currently $244 million. So that's what Kevin wrote. And again, the two things to take away are, right now, the Padres' projected payroll is at $210 million, with the arbitration-eligible players included in that, the projections for them. And again, Kevin writing, indications are that the opening day figure will be lower than what that payroll is right now based on the current guys. So he's basically indicating that they would have to come down from where they are right now. And then again, a little bit later, Kevin writes, there's quote-unquote, one source said there is quote-unquote, no scenario in which the Padres exceed the CBT threshold of $241 million. And again, right now, they're already projected to be a few $1 million over. So Kevin essentially saying it's really tight, and that payroll's actually, from where it probably is right now, projected, it's going to actually go down. So that was reporting from Kevin today. And then a little bit later, Kevin writing a piece, the headline, Padres exploring off-season options, which could include trading Dylan Cease. And Kevin writing here, most important part of the article, among their numerous conversations at this week's winter meetings are some with other teams regarding starting pitcher Dylan Cease. There's no indication any deal is imminent, but this is more than just fielding phone calls. League sources characterize the talks regarding Cease as being anywhere from trying to unload Cease to the Padres being open to trading the right-hander who turns 29 later this month and is projected to make between $13 million and $14 million in 2025, his final year of arbitration eligibility. So that's what Kevin writes, that the Padres are doing more, as Kevin writes, than just fielding phone calls for Dylan Cease. And you pair that report with what Kevin wrote earlier in the day about the Padres potentially trying to bring payroll down from where it would be right now, trying to stay under the luxury tax threshold. Well, one way you do that quickly is by trading somebody who's going to make $14 million, $13 million in arbitration. These two things kind of go hand in hand. And again, this is Kevin Acee reporting that earlier today. So, a little bit later in the day here in Dallas, I went one-on-one with AJ Preller. You'll hear a few questions here with AJ. You'll hear a little bit more on Roki Sasaki, how much of a role Yu Darvish may play in the Sasaki situation. But I also asked AJ, and Frank back in the studio, this is going to be AJ Preller 2. The clip name's AJ Preller 2. I asked AJ pretty directly about his appetite for exploring the trade market for a Dylan Cease or even a Michael King. Here was some of what AJ Preller and I talked about earlier today here in Dallas.
Roki Sasaki's agent, Joel Wolf, spoke with the media earlier today, went over some of the different factors that may go into Sasaki's decision on where he signs. What sort of impact do you believe that having Yu Darvish, Sasaki's admiration for Yu Darvish, what kind of role do you think, at least right now, that could play in your recruitment of Sasaki?
Yeah, I said it a few times. I mean, Yu is an asset for the organization, really with all of our players. You know, he's somebody that's incredibly detail oriented. He loves the game. He loves the Padres. He's somebody that really we try to give the ability to impact as many people as we can in the organization. He's a student of the game. I think seeing a few years ago in the World Baseball Classic, he went and spent time with the Japanese WBC team in Japan and really went through that whole experience with all of their players. He's a very unique person and pitcher, and means a lot to our organization. I think I'm sure all pitchers that are in players that are considering coming to the Padres, especially players coming from Japan and Roki's situation. Yu Darvish means a lot from that point.
You have two pitchers, very talented pitchers, in Michael King and Dylan Cease, who will be free agents at the end of the year. What's your current appetite for at least exploring their trade value in a starting pitching market that is generally pretty robust?
Yeah, I mean, again, in general, we have a team that ended the year. We feel like one of the better teams in the league, and a big part of it was because of Michael and Dylan. And I think for us, getting to where we want to get to, you need super talented and quality starting pitchers. Those two have they were tremendous this year in terms of getting us there, and we look forward to them getting better next year and taking another step in their development, helping us get to where we need to get to. So, it's a time of year where our group, we're always open-minded. You always listen to incoming phone calls and see what's out there. But again, it's those guys set a really high bar this year, and we're excited to see what they do next year.
At least right now, you have a couple of rotation spots open. Your organization has had a lot of success the last couple of years, stretching out relievers into starters, whether it was Seth Lugo, whether it was Michael King. At least right now, what level of exploration or at least a consideration is there in taking maybe somebody who's a reliever, say somebody with starting experience like an Adrian Morahone, and if you have a need, maybe trying something like that out with them?
Yeah, I think you mentioned with whether it's Nick Martinez or Lugo or King, guys that we've targeted that in Lugo and King standpoint, that we're basically relievers that we feel like because of their style and their pitch mix or their delivery and their mindset, that they had a chance to be starting pitchers. Again, we'll talk about it. I just mentioned, guys like Morahone or Hoeing or Stephen Kolick, have been guys that we've had conversations about, and there's a few others. We'll see. I think it's still kind of a TBD thing. It's still more internal conversation. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, we'll try to give those pitchers in that group an idea of, hey, prepare for this, and be ready for this spot. But yeah, finding starting pitching is always a big thing, and the ability to take some really talented pitchers that have been in a certain role and expand that role or change that role. That's something that's been on the table for this off season.
So that was AJ Preller earlier today. Myself and AJ here at the Hilton Anatole in Dallas. And look, we didn't get a ton there from AJ about Michael King and Dylan Cease. And again, Dylan Cease has been the one now where there are some rumblings. The Padres are fielding phone calls about him. We have not heard that about Michael King. And it makes sense because Michael King's not slated to make nearly as much money. In arbitration, he's slated to make like $8-9 million, and Cease is 13-14. So if you're going to trade one, well, you would assume you would trade the one that's making more money. So that makes a lot of sense. We didn't get a ton there, which is not surprising. AJ typically doesn't give you a ton on that kind of stuff, which is totally okay. But we did have the caller in our second segment ask about the rotation and what it would look like even if you got Sasaki. And we'll see if the Padres do elect to do anything with an Adrian Morejon or a Stephen Kolek or a Brian Hoeing, guys who have provided length in the past, guys that have been starting pitchers in the past. If you need a starter or two, or if you even just need starting pitching depth, could you see the Padres try to stretch out an Adrian Morejon, who had a really nice 2024 season, really by far and away the best season of his major league career? I think that's a really good question. There was a little bit earlier in the media scrum about the Padres, and we'll get to this a little bit later. Just a quick quote from AJ about shortstop and letting players know a little bit earlier this year, like Xander Bogaerts, whether he'll be at second, whether he'll be at shortstop. But look, you asked that question to AJ Preller, and it didn't get shut down, right? The idea that you could have, somebody like a Hoeing or a Morejon or a Kolek, get stretched out again and be an option for the Padres to start. So I just thought an interesting tidbit there at the end. So good stuff there from AJ. We'll hear more from AJ in our next segment at the top of the 8 p.m. hour. We'll hear about Jurickson Profar and the catching situation, so stay tuned for that. Also, at the top of the hour, obviously big news regarding former Padre Juan Soto on Sunday, and our resident Met fan, Frank Marchese, I'm sure will want to have his moment in the sun. We're going to let him have his moment in the sun. When we come back, plenty to come. You'll hear from Jake Peavy. Much, much more to do. We are live in Dallas, Texas. Winter Meetings. We continue on after this.
It's time for an inside look at what's cooking on the San Diego Padres hot stove as the team gets ready for the 2025 season.
Swing and a miss. Padres win.
Sam Levitt breaks down the Padres offseason moves and provides an in-depth look at everything you need to know before the Padres take the field for spring training.
Swinging a high fly ball. Deep left center. This one way back and gone.
Plus the latest headlines from around Major League Baseball and analysis of what's happening around the big leagues.
Breaking news out of baseball.
Welcome to Inside San Diego Baseball with the Padres Radio Network's pre- and post-game host, Sam Levitt.
Hour number 2 of our Tuesday night radio program, Inside San Diego Baseball, special edition on this Tuesday night, live from the Winter Meetings in Dallas, Texas. Sam Levitt with you at the Hilton Anatole, where the baseball world has come together for the 2024 Winter Meetings. We've got Frank Marchese producing back in the studio. In this final hour, we will get to a lot. We'll hear a little bit more from AJ Preller in just a little bit. We'll also hear from Padre Hall of Famer Jake Peavy, and we'll talk about 2 of the Padres' top prospects with Jonathan Mayo of MLB.com. We'll talk about Ethan Salas and Leah Dallas DeVries, and we will take your phone calls as well in this hour, 833-288-0973. Again, 833-288-0973, the phone number to call. Well, the early news, and I think you could safely say the biggest news of these winter meetings so far, Juan Soto, the former Padre, agreeing to a 15-year, $765 million deal with the New York Mets, the largest contract in baseball history, in American sports history, with escalators in the deal that could take the value upwards of $800 million. Frank Marchese back in the studio, our resident Met fan here at 97.3 The Fan. Frank, for the next minute or two, the floor is yours. Your reaction to the Mets prying Juan Soto from the New York Yankees, and your feelings about what the Mets did on Sunday night.
It's a wonderful day in Metland. It really, really is. As you know, growing up in the market, it's been the Met dream to steal a player as highly coveted as a guy like Juan Soto away from the Yankees. And they finally did it. Finally got it done. Now, did they overspend for him? Absolutely, they did. It's, as you said in our text chat the other night, it's not my money, so it doesn't really matter. But it's kind of one of those, for me, initially, it was one of those shocked, numb feelings. Like, this doesn't happen to the Mets. We got him. We finally got our guy. We finally got the big fish. It doesn't happen to us, and it just happened.
Yeah, look, yes, no secret. I grew up in the market, obviously. Look, I'm with you. It feels like a real seminal moment. But in the dynamic between those two teams, look, we wondered when Steve Cohen took over how and when he would really, and I mean really, flex the financial muscle. And my goodness, did he flex the financial muscle in the case of Juan Soto? Because, and as we've heard from Ryan Cashman, I believe, Aaron Boone to some capacity, this went to a level, even at $700-something million, a level that I don't think the Yankees ever wanted to go. They had to go there because they were competing with Steve Cohen and the Mets. And look, the Mets got their guy. From a Padres standpoint, I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, I guess good news is that he didn't end up in L.A., so you don't have to face him 13 times a year.
Never really thought that he would, or had
I
any
didn't either.
concept that he would.
I didn't either. I guess the best case scenario is that he would have ended up with the Yankees because then he's not in the National League. Beyond that, look, I think it's just an interesting, 10 years, 15 years down the road conversation to think about Juan Soto, his evolution since the trade from Washington to San Diego. The Padres make the trade for him. At the time, I think we all expected that the Padres would really try to keep him forever, and that the package they gave up for Juan Soto, they would try to keep him, to extend him. He plays the end of 2022 in San Diego, plays all of 2023 in San Diego, ends up being a very disappointing season. Then, during last offseason, they clearly need to shed payroll. They had no other option other than to trade Juan Soto.
And it was the right call. It was the right decision.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, they did great. What they ended up getting was great. Trade worked out for both teams. Yankees went to the World Series. Padres got Michael King, got Higgy, flipped Drew Thorpe partially into Dylan Cease. I think you could argue like A to A+ trade for both teams. But then when you fast forward it to a year later, and then 2 seasons after the initial trade to San Diego, I don't know that we could have ever. We knew Soto was going to make a lot of money at some point.
Absolutely.
But we could have not predicted, dreamed that this would get to the levels it ultimately got to. I mean, let's remember, earlier this year, people were talking like, hey, he could get $500 million. Like that was going to be the upper echelon. And it got to 800. So it's just a very interesting evolution from the initial offer he got in Washington that he didn't take. It spurs the Nationals to trade him to San Diego. Padres ultimately have to trade him because they want to cut payroll, and they can't figure out a way that they're ever going to extend him. It was the right thing to do at the time, and then he gets $800 million. So, look, from a Padres standpoint, is what it is. It's over. He'll go on with the Mets. We'll see how he does. We'll see how the Mets do. We'll see if these teams meet in the postseason again. We'll see all that. But it is really a remarkable. I'll tell you what. He's one of the more unique, superstar stories before they hit free agency. Traded twice on 3 different teams, turns down $440 million, and ultimately gets in this bidding war between the Mets and the Yankees and just signs an unbelievable, financial number.
Now, of course, time will tell as far as how successful he is with the Mets and how the Mets made out with this. The Padres, while on the field they didn't make out, and as I said during the Scraby show, he acknowledges and he knows that San Diego is not a big fan of his, and he completely understands why. But the Padres made out the best as far as any of the teams that have had him, because, of course, yes, C.J. Abrams, great pitcher. It's not Mackenzie Gore hasn't really blossomed into the pitcher that the Padres thought he would be.
James Wood is, Hassel has not been very good in the minors.
And you have the Padres who get back Michael King, who's an ace caliber pitcher. Drew Thorpe turned into Dylan Cease. Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, and Kyle Higashioka, who had a fantastic season last year. So and the Yankees are left with Trent Grisham. Good job, Yankees.
Well,
the
like
Padres
you said,
have made out the best so far out of any team that's had him.
Look. I think other than extending Soto or winning World Series with him here,
couldn't have been better.
Yeah, look, they did the best they could with the situation they were dealt last offseason. I think that's for sure. I think they did very, very well. And now we'll see. We'll see what Soto is with the Mets. We'll see, what he is, what he isn't, and when he's going to be a DH and all of that. and he's the 700 something to $800 million man. All right, let's get back to
really quick. I know you want to get back, but really quick.
Yes.
Just think, the Mets went from having a general manager who didn't go after Bryce Harper and didn't go after Manny Machado because of how
different
many
ownership.
Yeah, exactly. How many teams have two $30 million players on it? To an owner that said, "You want how much? That's it, really? Here's an extra $50 million for your modesty."
Right.
Like
Now,
that's amazing for an organization to have.
Yeah. Now look, the Mets have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely.
Aside from Soto,
Yeah.
I mean, look at the rotation. I mean,
This is
right
not a
now. I
World
don't even know
Series
that I
team
put
right
the
now.
Mets at 90 wins. So
No.
Anyway, but we'll get back to the Padres. And okay, enough about former Padre Juan Soto. But we had to have the conversation. Just happened on Sunday. We hadn't been on the air since then. All right, let's hear a little bit more from AJ Preller, and then I'm going to address a question that goes along with what some of what I spoke to AJ about in this clip from yesterday. I'll get to the comments on YouTube in just a second because I think it's an interesting comment. Frank, let's play AJ Preller 1. This was myself and AJ one-on-one yesterday talking about Jurickson Profar, the market for him, and the Padres catching situation as well.
Jurickson Profar was obviously a big part of the team last year, and obviously has a very good relationship to the clubhouse, a fan favorite, certainly. How do you view Jurickson in this current market? What kind of priority is he potentially for your team in 2025?
Yeah, Jurickson's, obviously he was a huge part of our team. Really, it's been the last 5 years in the organization. He's been on some playoff teams and right in the middle of the 2022 and 24 runs. And to see, it's an all-star caliber production this year. But he also means a lot to the group, in terms of, the relationship with Manny and Tatis and his competitive spirit. He brought a lot to Schilte in year one. So we respect that. We understand that. We value that. Again, he's also earned the right to be a free agent, and it's a very competitive marketplace. So we'll keep talking to Jurickson and Danny Lozano, his agent, and we'll see where it takes us.
Finally, on the catching front, a number of free agents have already come off the board. Luis Campusano is playing down in the Dominican League. What can you tell us your thoughts about just your catching situation in general right now?
Yeah, I think again, we knew, going into it, Higgy is a free agent. It's an area that, we're gonna, felt like as we went into the offseason, we got to be prepared to see what else is out there and who's there. Made a very competitive offer. It felt like with Higgy, and again, wish him a lot of, wish him the best going forward. He made a lot of fans in San Diego, this past year. It was a real part of our team. We wanted to bring him back. Ultimately, again, he as a free agent, he made a decision to go elsewhere. We've been in on pretty much all the catchers that have signed so far, and I think it's good for Campy. He's down there playing. Campusano down there playing in the Dominican Republic. Brett Sullivan on the roster. It's probably an area though over the course of the next couple of weeks that we still look to supplement, either trade or free agency wise, and continue to add to the depth that we have behind the dish.
So let's address the two parts of what I asked AJ about there. And let's start with the catching situation. I think no surprise the Padres are going to look to make a move. And that could be a free agent remaining. Remember, Kyle Higashioka to Texas. Gary Sanchez off the board. Danny Jansen off the board. We talked about it last week here on this show. Free agent options are not particularly strong. They would be cheap, probably, but they're not particularly strong. So how the Padres are going to address their catching situation, I would say is got to be a big priority. And how they'll fit Luis Campusano and or Brett Sullivan into that mix, we'll see. But I thought it was, a pretty clear answer there from AJ Preller that they are going to address that catching situation. So that's a good thing because I certainly think they need to. Now, with Jurickson Profar, I think it's going to be very interesting. The Padres and Jurickson have a relationship that has been very much mutually beneficial. Jurickson comes to the Padres last spring training on a $1 million base salary, and he was unbelievable. He was the MVP of the team for a good portion of the season, had an unbelievable year, and to his credit, played himself into a position where now as a free agent, from what I understand, from what I've heard, I mean, he's going to get probably a 3-year deal or more, $10+ million per year. It sounds like that kind of offer is going to be on the table for Jurickson Profar. And based on what Kevin Acee reported earlier today, the financial constraints the Padres are reportedly going to be under, according to Kevin, I'll tell you what, it starts to get a little hard to foresee that reunion, to be honest with you. Now, again, depending on what the Padres do, how they elect to handle this whole situation, if they do trade away a $14 million of salary in a Dylan Cease, and maybe more, well, might free him up to go get Jurickson Profar. But it's interesting to think about. Just based on the math, if Profar is going to get that kind of deal, it would seem maybe tough for the Padres to get him back here. But again, we know Jurickson loves playing here. He loves being a part of this group. He's uniquely had the best years of his career in San Diego, and maybe there's a deal to be made. And we'll see. Again, I'm not going to sit here and judge the big picture of this offseason until I understand what the Padres are going to do and moves they make and trades they may make and payroll they may free up. Now, it takes me to a comment from a little bit earlier on YouTube, and this was a good one. This was from Greg. Greg asking, what are your thoughts on Tirso Ornelas in left field if we can't re-sign Profar? His numbers in AAA looked good, but would they translate to the big leagues? Well, Greg, we talked about this last Wednesday on the show. We talked about some of the minor league deals the Padres had given out, and we talked about Tirso Ornelas, somebody who has been in the organization forever, had a good year at AAA. For whatever reason, even though he was on the 40-man roster at the end of last season, the Padres have not given him that opportunity yet. But let's say the Padres are operating under pretty significant financial constraints. You know, I guess it's not impossible that you could go to spring training with that job open for guys that are at spring training, including a guy like a Tirso. So right now, based on their minor league system, if things stood as they were and Profar wasn't back, I would think he would have a shot to make a major league roster. But we don't know what the situation is yet. He has not received that opportunity yet. Greg, to be honest with you, I don't know enough about Tirso Ornelas and have not watched him enough to know or have an opinion on whether his skill set will translate to the major leagues. I don't know, and to be frank with you, you never know with anybody until they actually get up here and do it. But look, depending on what the Padres do with their outfield and Jurickson Profar, he may have an opportunity. We'll see. These are the kinds of things that we're going to find out over the course of the next 2 months. You know, how serious the Padres are going to have to take a guy like Tirso Ornelas, depending on the situation they find themselves in by the time we get to Peoria in early February. So it's a really good question, but it's kind of it's intertangled with this Profar situation and the outfield situation in general for the Padres. When we return, we'll hear from Jake Peavy, Padre great. I talked with Jake earlier today here at the Winter Meetings. We talk about Jackson Merrill. We talk about Michael King. We talk about the Padres season in 2024. We'll get to Jake Peavy, Padre Hall of Famer, when we return on 97.3 The Fan. We roll right along here on Inside San Diego Baseball. Sam Levitt with you here in Dallas, Texas at the Winter Meetings, the 2024 Major League Baseball Winter Meetings in Dallas, Texas, here at the Hilton Anatole. Good to have you with us on this Tuesday night. We've discussed, I would say, a lot so far on the program. We had a lot of talk about Roki Sasaki in our first hour. We heard from Sasaki's agent, Joel Wolf, all the different elements that may play into where Sasaki ultimately will decide to sign coming over from Japan. We took your phone calls, and we will take more of your phone calls. We do have time for more. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. If you want to get a call in before 9 p.m., we will take your phone calls. We talked about Jurickson Profar, his market, where the Padres may turn if they can't bring back Jurickson Profar. We discussed at length the potential financial restrictions the Padres may be under, according to Kevin Acee earlier today in the San Diego Union Tribune, and sort of another article from Kevin that I think goes hand in hand with the one from this morning, and that is the fact that the Padres are reportedly taking phone calls on Dylan Cease. So a lot to chew on with all of that. But on another note, earlier today, I was in the lobby here in Dallas, and I ran into a Padre great. Number 44. Well, the 44 before Joe Musgrove was 44. And, of course, that's Jake Peavy, Padres Hall of Famer. Had a great opportunity to catch up with Jake Peavy, talk about last year's team, Jackson Merrill, Michael King, and much, much more. Here was a great conversation with Padre Hall of Famer Jake Peavy. Here with Padres great Jake Peavy here at the MLB Winter Meetings in Dallas, Texas. And Jake, let's talk a little Padres. Obviously, they had a great regular season, came up a little bit short in the division series. How do you assess what the Padres did last year and now what they do moving forward?
Oh, man, I couldn't have been any more proud of last year's team, top to bottom. The front office did an incredible job of putting that squad together. I mean, the Soto trade, it starts there, but then going out and acquiring Arise and just the additions, Cease, and just so on. Very creative and great, complete baseball team, all the way to the back end of the bullpen being the strongest in the game, if you ask me. So, incredible job of the front office, but then it went into Mike Schultz's hands and got to get the best out of the players. Had to get them to play together. We certainly saw that happened. Fan base is on board. Everybody's together. Pulling in the same direction. We had a team to win a World Series this year. Damn those Dodgers.
Let's talk about one of the guys they got back in that Soto trade around this time last year, and that's Michael King. First time as a full-time starting pitcher, really for months on end. He was one of the best starting pitchers in baseball. Your impressions of what Michael King did last year?
I was thrilled with Michael. I saw him make the transition in New York, being at the network. Was watching closely when New York transitioned him into a starter, and I think it's similar to what you're seeing the Mets going to do with Clay Holmes, understanding big sinker and slider. When you can move the ball like that, you can get guys out multiple times through with the same look because it's got late movement. And Michael, I think we saw in the playoff start, the world saw what he's capable of on the biggest stage. So one more year of retention of Michael King in San Diego. Let's hope for many more.
One of the big stories of last year was the terrific rookie season of Jackson Merrill. Certainly you know what it's like to be a star in San Diego, to help lead a really successful team in San Diego. What did you think about what Jackson Merrill accomplished in his rookie season?
I thought what the rest of the fan base did. I was pleasantly surprised with this kid making the club. And then you see over in Korea he looks the part. And at 20 years old, it's a daunting task to come up and play alongside Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts and so on, Fernando, and hold your own and look like one of them and better at times. So then to move positions and play shortstop. But at the end of the day, I think I love the way he comes to play every day. You can just see the youthfulness, energy that he brings to the ballpark every day. Plays hard, plays, passionate. I'm down with that, as you know.
As far as the Padres moving forward into 2025, obviously they're still figuring out what exactly their payroll number might be, the different holes they need to fill this offseason, how they'll go about doing that.
But what do you like about what they have? Their star power. There's Machado, Tatis, Bogarts, Merrill, King, Cease. List goes on. What do you like about at least what they have right now before they figure out all the answers for 2025?
Well, I know there's been some pieces lost from last year's team, but when you look at last year's team, you go, man, that was a very complete team, balanced through the lineup, playing good defense, playing together, and then the pitching staff, really good starters and a good bullpen. I know, again, there's some loss around those names, but not a ton of it. Most of that core is back, and then they should have a bitter taste in their mouth. That team knew that they could win the World Series and was talking about winning the World Series. Things got a little bit squirrely. If you ask me, when things got raucous in L.A., I think a little bit of our attention got off the job at hand and a little bit on the stuff around the edges and just didn't get it done versus the Dodgers, who, tit for tat, any little thing could have happened. Darvish pitched so well in Game 5. You're just a play or two away. They know that. So you now know what it takes to win in the postseason. You're together. You're hungry. Look at this Philadelphia team. They've had a great team for the last 3 or so years, broke our hearts even, and haven't been able to pull off the ultimate prize. It's a very tough thing, but get ready, San Diego. It's coming.
Jake, finally, you look at kind of what's transpired in San Diego the last handful of years, the investment in the team, the fan base. I mean, you sit there every night at Petco Park, the place is sold out. This city is so invested in this team. What's it been like for you, as somebody who means so much to the organization, to watch the evolution of what Padres baseball has become for the fans?
Well, it's a dream. This is the dream that you wanted, and it certainly there was bits and there was moments in my time there along the ride that you saw that could happen, but nothing like what Peter Seidler and family have done, and did while he was alive, and what they continue to do in his legacy. Is just inspiring, and I think the community's felt that hey, we've got good people in charge who care about our team. They're spending money trying to do anything at all costs to give you a World Series, but then they're active in the community and trying to help with some of the problems and loving on being a community member and a pillar, which the Padres are. So, look, for somebody who spent 10 plus years of my adult life in the city, continued to live there when I played in other places, to see it on fire for baseball, to see us have superstars and call ourselves a baseball town, I'm very proud. San Diego, you should be proud too.
And that was Padre Hall of Famer Jake Peavy earlier today at the Winter Meetings in Dallas. A lot of good stuff there from Jake on Michael King, on Jackson Merrill, on the way the Padres season ended last year, and on the evolution of what Padres fans continue to do at Petco Park, fill the place up, and certainly hope it's that way again in 2025. A couple of notes here before we hit our final break of the hour and of the program. And again, I do have a really good conversation in our next segment coming up with Jonathan Mayo, who covers the minor leagues about as well as anybody out there. He writes for MILB.com, is on MLB Network from time to time. We have a really extended conversation about the Padres minor league system and their top two prospects, Ethan Salas and Leonidas DeVries. But a couple of notes here before we go to break. This is just come down in the last 5 minutes. This is from, I'm reading the tweet from Fox Sports, but this is according to John Denton, Cardinals beat reporter for MLB.com. Something that admittedly, and I was talking with some of my Cardinals beat reporter friends today, I did not realize showing up to the winter meetings that it was a real priority, apparently, for the Cardinals to move Nolan Arenado this offseason. I just wasn't in tune with it heading into the winter meetings, but it certainly sounds like, from what Cardinals president of baseball operations, John Mozeliak, has said, like they're going to do their best to move him. And the Cardinals are in an interesting spot where they've got young players. They want to see what they've got. They may be trying to shed payroll. I'm not sure. Look, I don't follow the Cardinals super closely, but they're in a spot with no more Paul Goldschmidt, some younger guys coming up where they want to really look to move Nolan Arenado. So, according to John Denton of MLB.com, Arenado would be willing to accept a trade to the following teams, to waive his no-trade clause to the following teams: the Dodgers, the Padres, the Angels, the Phillies, the Mets, and the Red Sox. So, hey, Padres are on that list. I'm not sure how he would fit. I mean, he's expressed interest recently, reportedly, of playing first base to maybe expand the number of teams he could go to. Padres could use him like that. Look, I don't know if there's going to be any conversation, any real rumbling, any connection based on the Padres' interest in Arenado or not. But it is interesting that Arenado is on that list. So just a note for you, and that's something to keep an eye on. Does seem like that's something the Cardinals are really trying to do, and that is trade a guy who's been a really, really, really good player in Nolan Arenado. All right, let's step aside. When we return, I do want to read a little bit of a piece from Dennis Lin of The Athletic that came down in the last hour, give you a little bit more insight on the Dylan Cease situation and market, the Roki Sasaki situation, and an extended conversation with Jonathan Mayo of MILB.com about Ethan Salas, Leah Dallas DeVries, and the current state of the Padres minor league system. Our final segment from Dallas here at the Winter Meetings at the Hilton Anatole continues when we return on the Padres Radio Network here on see, now my brain's not working. It's getting late here in Dallas, Texas. We are not on the Padres Radio Network, but we are on 97.3 The Fan. we continue on inside San Diego baseball on this Tuesday night from the MLB Winter Meetings in Dallas, Texas. Sam Levitt with you here in Dallas. We've got Frank Marchese back in the studio, holding things down, getting us on the air, chiming in from time to time as we bring you up till 9 p.m. in San Diego. We've done a lot of talking about a lot of different things, and as always, if you missed any portion of the program, you can go back and listen to all of it on the Inside San Diego Baseball podcast. That'll be up shortly after we are done, and of course, we always invite you to go and watch our program, all the shows on 97.3 The Fan, on the 97.3 The Fan YouTube stream, where I am in my hotel room here at the Winter Meetings, and Frank continues to look slimmer and slimmer. He's got a button down on. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. Frank looking very, very good on camera back in the San Diego studios. So good job by Frank as he continues to look terrific. All right, so we'll hear from Jonathan Mayo of MILB.com. Does a terrific job covering the minor leagues, one of the best out there to do it. And I talked with him about Ethan Salas, Leah Dallas DeVries, and the current state of the Padres minor league system. So we'll get to that in just a little bit. But we've done a lot of talking about the market for Dylan Cease, the chance that the Padres could try to trade Dylan Cease, the Padres' financial restrictions, what Kevin Acee reported on this morning, all of that. So I did want to read this piece from Dennis Lin in The Athletic that came out within the last hour, because there are some additional nuggets in here as well that I think are really worth getting to before we get to anything minor league related. So let me read some of this. Again, this is from Dennis Lin, Padres beat reporter for The Athletic. Dennis writing, "The Padres, too, are hungry for starting pitching. A trade of Cease for now is not considered likely. San Diego would prefer to keep the right-hander, Michael King, and Yu Darvish atop its staff in 2025. A little bit later, Dennis continues, Cease, a Scott Boras client like Soto and Burns, that's Juan Soto and Corbin Burns, is projected to earn roughly $14 million in his final year of arbitration eligibility. While the Padres still harbor some hope of eventually extending King, they are not under the assumption they will be able to afford Cease beyond 2025. Dennis continues, in a potential trade, they would seek multiple controllable players, the same kind of return they received for Soto. One or more of those players ideally would be a starting pitcher. If not, the Padres, in theory, could flip some of the return for starting pitching. Dennis continues, the Padres may have incentive to wait before deciding whether or not to hang on to Cease. Roki Sasaki, the eminently affordable Japanese ace and San Diego's top target, is not expected to sign with the team until January 15th at the earliest. And a little bit later, Dennis continues, then again, despite public rhetoric, the Padres do not view themselves as prohibitive favorites for Sasaki, and Preller is known for his relentlessness concoction of contingency plans. And in the meantime, the market for starting pitching is really moving. So again, that was part of the article from Dennis Lin in The Athletic, and you can read all that, the full article on the Athletic website. Look, that kind of falls in line with what has already been reported. Look, it certainly sounds like what we've heard from Kevin, what we've heard from Dennis. Like, this is, not a done deal by any means that the Padres are going to trade Dylan Cease, but it certainly sounds like a very, very real possibility for all the reasons that Kevin and Dennis have laid out. And when you pair it with the potential payroll restrictions, again, it's almost like something's got to give, right? Something has got to give in the sense of you've got to find a way to reduce payroll. You've got to find a way to get, to fill holes, to get creative. And of all the guys that you could move, Dylan Cease makes sense because he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, and he's also due 14 to 15, maybe that's a little high, 13 to 14 million dollars in arbitration. So it's something to keep in mind. I don't know that anything will happen by the time we leave the winter meetings tomorrow night, but it's certainly something to keep in mind and monitor, because it's something that in the last 48 hours I think is clearly coming more to the forefront, the idea that the Padres may end up moving Dylan Cease. Now, we talk about the level of creativity the Padres are going to need. And I think it's important to also consider, when we talk trade, it doesn't necessarily only mean trading away somebody like Dylan Cease, but can also mean trading for somebody of great value. We know the Padres and the White Sox have, even before last year's trade deadline, been linked, and that the Padres have been interested in left-hander Garrett Crochet. Now, there was a report from Bob Nightingale since we got to the winter meetings that the Padres to this point have been unwilling to part with either of their top two prospects in Ethan Salas or Leodalis DeVries in a trade for Garrett Crochet. And for a while now, it certainly seemed like the Padres view those guys as sort of untouchable. But, you know, do I know if they're totally, really untouchable? I do not. But I thought it was worth getting an idea from somebody who really covers the minor leagues and the Padres system and top prospects, getting an idea of where Salas and DeVries are, right? How untouchable are they? Why are they so untouchable? Ethan Salas had a very up and down year at High A Fort Wayne. DeVries is even younger. Played a little bit at Lake Elsinore last year. Both those guys were in the Arizona Fall League. So earlier today, I talked with Jonathan Mayo, MILB.com, one of the real great reporters on minor league baseball and prospects. And I wanted to get his opinion on, the Padres minor league system as a whole, considering, remember, how many prospects they traded away in the Cease trade, the Arise trade, the Adam trade, the Scott trade. I mean, the cupboard appears more bare, certainly, than it did a year ago. So what the reputation of the system is right now, and more specifically his feelings on DeVries and Salas, I caught up with Jonathan Mayo of MILB.com earlier today here in Dallas. Well, Jonathan, this time last year, the Padres system was really deep. They obviously make a number of trades in 2024, the Arise trade, the Cease trade, the Adam trade, the Scott trade. How would you assess the San Diego Padres minor league system right now?
I think, obviously, it's thinner than it was, and it's kind of the AJ Preller way. You know, he builds it up, and then, I don't say he tears it down, he uses it to try to compete. So that's his sort of standard operating procedure. The good news is that there's still some exciting players in the system. He didn't get rid of everybody. He's held on to a couple of the really important pieces, and I think that bodes well for the future, because you look at some of the other organizations, you know, especially within the division. You look at the Dodgers, who managed to spend a lot of money up top and try to win, but keep that wheel going so there's more trade chips and there are more guys to bring up to help out also.
The two top guys in the system, Ethan Salas and Leodalis DeVries. Let's talk about Salas first. Had a bit of an up and down season at High A Fort Wayne. How do you assess where Ethan Salas is? Obviously, very highly touted now that he's played a couple of seasons in the minors.
Yeah, he's such a weird guy to figure out where to put. You know, we probably got a little too excited. I think the Padres got a little too excited. And in retrospect, developmentally, rushing him up to Double-A may have been a mistake. The exciting thing is that he could even spend another year in High A, which I don't think he will. As a teenager, I mean, it's kind of crazy, or maybe he's 20 now. I don't remember, but super young for the level. And I think last year was kind of a regular learning year when, at his age, he should have probably been in low A, and I saw him in the fall league. He looked really good. A little tired by the end of it, but he looked more like the guy that we were, getting very excited about. And so I think that they knew with his makeup that kind of pushing him that aggressively.
Right.
There are some plays you do that to, and you might kill them, right? They won't be able to come back from that. But I think they had a sense that he understood the process. He's got such a good head on his shoulders that he would be able to deal with any of the adversity that he faced, and he's faced a lot of it, and come back from it and learn from it. And I think we started to see signs of that in the fall league, so I'm excited. I think 2025 we're going to sort of see the guy that got people really excited as he rushed up to Double A in 23.
And he is so young. He's under 20 still. In your opinion, as a prospect evaluator, in the long run, can going through some adversity for the first time as that level of prospect, can that be a good thing ultimately?
Oh, it's definitely a good thing. I think, you don't want a guy to get stuck at a level for too long, no matter how high you perceive him to be. And, you don't want him to get too down on himself. And that's what I talk about his makeup. Like, he's not going to be too concerned about that. I think he's going to learn from that. I think we've all seen prospects who run through the minor leagues and there are no challenges and they succeed at every level. And then they get to the big leagues, and you're going to face adversity in the big leagues. I don't care if you're the greatest player who's ever played the game. Mike Trout, when he first got to the big leagues, was terrible, and then had to go back down, and then came back and was the Mike Trout we've seen for the last decade plus. But I think that in a perfect world, they do face some of that. You don't want a guy to go through injury, but coming back from that is important developmentally. It's not just reps, as a hitter or behind the plate or working with pitchers. All that's important, but how do you come back from an 0 for 5? How do you come back from hitting 130 over a month? If that's going to happen, in all likelihood at the highest level, and when you get to that highest level where it is a results-oriented business 100%, if you really fall on your face, that can be much harder to come back from. So I think it's going to be nothing but a positive for him.
Let's talk about the other top prospect, Leonidas DeVries, obviously very highly touted, top international signing. Played in Lake Elsinore for a little bit last year, played in the Arizona Fall League. Your thoughts on DeVries, who is also very, very young?
Yeah, not shockingly, the Padres aggressively promoted him to full season ball, and he held his own. Sending him in the Fall League was interesting, and that's not, let's see if he's ready for the big leagues. They're not making a 40-man decision, nothing like that. I think they just wanted to see how he would handle the competition. And, you can go look up his numbers, and they're not going to jump off the page, but he looked like he belonged. I saw him several times. He didn't hit a ton, but he had good at-bats. He's, has this professional approach that belies his years, and he can really play shortstop. Really play shortstops. And that's where he looked like he belonged. He looked like a major league shortstop already. And he also plays with an energy and a joy. At the end of a long year, sometimes guys are dragging a little bit in the Fall League, and he was having fun. Even though he was hitting $160 or whatever it was at the time, I just like how he went about it. And sometimes you just watch a guy, not for what he looks like in the box score, but how he fits in, and he very much looked like he belonged with that level of competition.
That was Jonathan Mayo of MILB.com. Does a great job covering minor league baseball. Some really good and insightful thoughts on the Padres system. Ethan Salas and Leonidas DeVries. And again, the question is, just when you talk about those two guys and some of the creativity that AJ Preller may have to get to this offseason based on everything we've discussed over the last 2 hours, are those guys untouchable? Absolutely untouchable. It certainly sounds like the White Sox want one of them, at least. But the Padres to this point have been unwilling to part with either in a deal for Garrett Crochet. So just a little minor league insight. A couple of headlines for you to wrap up the program. The Red Sox reportedly tonight getting ready to offer a contract to right-hander Corbin Burns. That's according to Chris Cotillo and Sean McAdam of Mass Live. And the reason I bring that up, it ties back into the Dylan Cease conversation because starting pitching is really, really desirable right now. Max Fried agreeing to a $200+ million deal with the Yankees earlier today. Blake Snell is signed. Nathan Eovaldi heading back to the Rangers earlier today. Corbin Burns, now some rumors starting to pick up on him. It will be very interesting to see how AJ Preller, how this front office, how they gauge the market for Dylan Cease, and also what the timing looks like, how it relates to Roki Sasaki, how it relates to other pitchers coming off the market, because you can make the argument that it's in the Padres' best interest to wait until they know what's going on with Sasaki, and also wait until at least most of these free agent starting pitchers come off the board, and you get into a spot where you may be dealing with teams that are really desperate for a guy like Cease because they didn't land a Fried, they didn't land a Corbin Burns, they didn't land a Blake Snell, and then you have maybe one of the crown jewels of starting pitchers available, and you can name your price. So, again, it will be very, very interesting to see how the Padres handle it and to see all they do moving forward. So, going to be an interesting final 24 hours here at the winter meetings. I will be here in Dallas throughout the day tomorrow, head back to San Diego in the evening. So let's hope if there's any Padres news, it's before about 6 p.m. tomorrow. I also have the manager's breakfast tomorrow, which I went to last year, where myself and the beat reporters that cover the Padres, and they do this for every major league manager and the various media, we all get to have breakfast tomorrow together. So that's fun. It was a nice time last year. Good opportunity to chat with Mike Schilt, so that should be fun tomorrow morning. I will be on with Ben and Woods tomorrow morning. I'll be on the station multiple times tomorrow. All our coverage on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. More content, more videos, more analysis, more news, more rumors from the MLB Winter Meetings here in Dallas. Ben and Woods on at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. We'll talk to you next Wednesday here on Inside San Diego Baseball on 97.3 The Fan.
Chris Ello.